In this lecture, I am going to explain the network monitoring and traffic analysis, which is the prime requirement for the intrusion detection systems, especially to make the signatures. We have seen the intrusion detection systems will work with the help of the signatures, and there are two categories in IDPSs. One is anomaly based IDS, and another is signature based IDS. In the signature based IDS, we have the signature patterns. That is, a traffic pattern will be there that will be fed into the IDPS databases. Whatever the traffic it snips, then it will compare with the feeded database, and if it find any wrong pattern, then immediately it will give you an alarm. This is what the general way of doing. So here, first and foremost thing in the IDPS traffic signature writing, the first one is examining the common vulnerabilities and exposures standard. So this is very important to understand by the learners. That means here we are supposed to understand what is the common vulnerabilities and exposure standards. So here, what is this common vulnerabilities means? To prevent attacks, make sure your security devices share information and coordinate with another. This is an important aspect actually. If your security devices won't share any information, then it is also very difficult for the vendors or developers of that security product to release the patches. That is, especially the security patches, if any security lapses was found. So to prevent the attacks, obviously the security devices must communicate. Each device use its own language of communication. So the way they interpret signatures might differ sometimes. A simple example is in your operating systems, if something was gone wrong or if something was struck up, then you may get a message that do you want to report this error or do you want to report this problem? So yes or no. So in general, you will find this kind of thing in Ubuntu Linux or in maybe in most of the Windows also. Do you want to report this problem or something? And at the same time, in the Microsoft Defender or in the Microsoft security points, okay, whenever this new file was identified as malicious or some malicious activity was identified, immediately a pop-up will come and will say that okay, this is the problem identified. Okay, do you want to report it or do you want to scan it? So this kind of information. So sometimes you can also by default enable that you may directly report it if you find any such kind of activity. That means without asking the user itself, directly it can be reported to the vendors. That means here, whenever this type of problems occurred, don't say that don't click on that don't report. So you always are supposed to place the report, because whenever any problem are identified or faced by your computer, then if it is asking that do you want to report this, so you are supposed to allow this to report. Many of the users usually will worry that they may be using a pirated version of the operating system. They may be caught if you send this error report. Obviously, sometimes it is possible, and sometimes it may be possible that you may be caught if you are not using a genuine operating system. So it is always recommended to a genuine operating system. If it is in case of Windows, in case of Ubuntu Linux and all, those are free. You can use it for free of cost. So there you no need to worry it. But one thing important is always you try to report the errors. Otherwise, these errors and these malicious patterns cannot be analyzed by the vendors, and they cannot develop the patches or security updates based on the errors they have received. Usually, whatever the errors we got, that will be updated at the error database at their end. They will be analyzing those error databases on a regular basis. So, if any, then they will rate the errors like in medium level or risk, highly risk or risk, this kind of rankings they will give, and based upon the top risk and risks, they will release the security updates. And whenever the security updates are released, then automatically it will benefit your system also. From next time onwards, you won't find such problems. So that is what the basic idea of reporting errors or reporting problems in case of any wrong pattern or wrong thing was observed in your computer. So, but what will happen here is each and every security device will use their own way of communication. That means their own language. But there should be a unified language to communicate by any security device. That is what the common vulnerabilities and exposures standard database. So this common vulnerabilities and exposure, which in short we'll call it as CVE standard, enables devices to share information using some same standard. That is what the CVE database is. Then how this particular common vulnerability exposures database will work? CVE enables hardware and security devices to draw from same database of vulnerabilities. What is the benefit of this? Is stronger security, better performance. When purchasing an intrusion detection system or IDPS, make sure that they will support the common vulnerability exposure database. So what is this CVE? The CVE will be looking like this. This is the common vulnerability exposures website. You can go to the www.cve.mitre.org. This website will give you the common vulnerability exposures database website information. So CVE is a list of records, each containing an identification number, a description, and at least one public reference for publicly known cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Then that means whatever the vulnerabilities identified across the world were reported to this CVE database, and the CVE, what it will do is it will list the records with a unique identification. Okay, that means unique identification means with that ID itself you will come to know what is its attack pattern and what is the consequence of attack, what is the level or severity of this vulnerability. This kind of thing you can identify or you can fetch from the this CVE database. So CVE is a list of records, as I told you just now. So here the in CVE, okay, the various countries around around 149 countries, total countries are around 25 are participating and reporting this content, vulnerability content, so that this CVE is maintaining that repository, and you can download this CVE repository for free. You can go to the downloads section where you will find download CVE list. The CVE list available in various formats like .csv file, .html, .txt, .xml. So various forms are available. Based upon the IDPS that you use, what form that IDPS supports, you can download that form and you can feed it into the IDPS databases. So this is the way you can use this CVE repository. Let will examine what is the CVE repository. Just I am clicking on the text or HTML. You can click on HTML also, no problem. So here the CVE version 2006-1101, a candidates as of 2021-01-07. Today is 07-1-2021. So as on date, what is the updated list of common vulnerabilities identified? So around 1,46,976 cybersecurity vulnerabilities were recorded in this database. That means that many vulnerabilities were identified and listed in the database. So every vulnerability will be having this unique identification number, that is CVE-1999-001. That is the starting vulnerability. I think so it will have updated. And one thing is for every year they are mentioning some number. That means this vulnerability was identified in 1999 and this is the first vulnerability. Like that, so 1999 second vulnerability, third vulnerability, like that year followed by the vulnerability number that was recorded into the database will be listed here. A simple example that we'll see here, CVE 1999-001 is nothing but IP underscore input dot C in BSD derived TCP IP implementation allows remote attackers to cause a denial of service, crash or hang via crafted packets. That means this vulnerability available in the BSD derived TCP IP implementation. That means whenever any Linux operating system is used, that BSD versions are having the TCP IP implementations which are available in the operating system, which are as the inbuilt implementation that allows the remote attackers to cause a denial of service. So when they use this IP underscore input dot C file and execute on the BSD machines, then they can easily conduct a denial of service or crash, or we can say via crafted packets. So this is what the vulnerability they identified. That means there is a vulnerability present in the IP underscore input dot C. It may be occurred because of the software problems, or maybe software vulnerability like buffer overflows, or maybe the uncaught exceptions, maybe any other reason. These vulnerabilities were identified. Like that, every vulnerability name, if for example, if you look at CVE 1999-002, like that buffer overflow in NFS mounted gives root access to remote attackers, mostly in the Linux systems. So that means if you might have executed a buffer overflow code, then this network file system mount D, that is mount D service that is used in the Linux operating system, will give directly root access for the remote attacker. So this is what the vulnerability identified in that particular operating system. So these are the vulnerability informations that are already feeded into many of the exploit tools like open source tools such as Metasploit in case of Kali Linux and many other exploiting tools. So if during the scanning, if the attacker found that this is the vulnerability identified with the vulnerability code via vulnerability scanners, then they can easily use that payload, and they may try to exploit that payload on the target machine so that the target machine will be compromised. So this is the way usually this common vulnerability database will be used by the attackers for knowing what type of vulnerability present on the target machine. Sometimes exploiting of the target machine vulnerability may also give the scope for entry into the internal networks. So that is what the dangerous thing, because here if you look at if they conduct a denial of service attack on the BSD derived TCP IP implementation, then obviously all the internal networks and the network perimeter devices will work with the TCP implementation only, TCP IP implementation only. When this is compromised, then it is not a big task for the attacker to compromise other network security devices on the organizational network. That is what the basic idea of this CVE, and as the basic idea of CVE is to make a common platform for any type of vulnerability identified across the world. So that is what the CVE is. So many of the open source IDPSs will support this CVE database. So our SNOT IDPS will also support the CVE vulnerability database. So it is the task for you to go and explore this common vulnerability exposure database so that you will get a more understanding of how this CVEs will be used. Now I will show you one thing here. This is the virtual machine in which I am running Kali Linux and vulnerable OS v2. The one who have already attempted my ethical hacking course may be knowing this, because I'm taking one standard vulnerable operating system and I'm explaining irrespective of the course, because the one who attended previous courses of mine may be easily come to know the next courses, next topics, because I'm using the standard the vulnerable applications. So here Kali Linux I'm using, and vulnerable OS I'm using. Both the Kali Linux and vulnerable OS operating systems are configured with the host only adapter. Now what I'm doing is I'm running the Kali Linux and also the vulnerable OS v2 application. So this vulnerable OS v2 is an operating system. This I am running where you cannot enter into the this OS. Okay, this is OS is banned to enter into this. But only thing is you are supposed to identify the loopholes of this OS by performing various activities from the Kali Linux, and you need to identify what are the possible entry points to attack this operating system. So on this vulnerable OS v2, you will find the implementation of that is running of various web servers and many other different servers. So you are supposed to get the information about these servers and any vulnerabilities in these servers on the which is running on vulnerable OS v2 via this Kali Linux. So for this, the host only adapter that what I am using here is the with the series 19.168.1.1. So we have seen during the port scanning discussion in TCP that Nmap, that is network mapper, is a tool which is popular for performing the scanning. So what I'm doing is I don't know what is the IP address of the vulnerable OS v2 because both are dynamically configured. So I can test the IP address of the Kali Linux by ifconfig, but I cannot. I don't know what is the IP address of what is the IP address of vulnerable OS v2. So I know the IP address is 198.168.1.33 for the Kali Linux, but what I don't know what is the IP address of vulnerable OS v2. So what you can do is Nmap. You can perform any scanning technique, simple scanning technique. Okay, for on the subnet 190.168.1.1 by 24. So it will take some time to scan all the IP addresses that are in the subnet of 190.168.1.1 by 24, and will give you the information of the ports that are open on the IP addresses that are available on this subnet. Well, we got the information that we know that IP address of our Kali Linux is 192.168.1.33, and here one IP address was reported here 192.168.1.2, which is for the DHCP, and here 192.168.1.37, which is we can expect this may be of vulnerable OS v2's operating system's IP address. Okay, so in which you will find here the port 22, 80, and 667. Sorry, 6667 is open. Okay, so the ports are open. That is 22 port is open, and 80, which is of running with the HTTP service, will be was opened, and another service, some other TCP service running with the port 6667 is also opened. So here 22 is secure socket host service, and 80 is for the HTTP service, and IRC service is the 6667. So these are the ports that are binded to TCP are open. So with this Nmap scan, I come to know that okay, what are the open ports on other computers, and also I got the IP address, which is a live mission. Okay, a live mission means which is up and running. Okay, that is the live mission. So you make note of the live mission, that is 19.168.1.37, and also you can come to know that the port 80 is also open. The port 80 is nothing but that means something is going on. Some web services are running on the computer. So what I can do is I will open the browser, and I will try to get some information about this browser, web services that are running there. That means is there any active web services running on the vulnerable OS v2 that I'm going to check here. So what I will do is http:// what is the IP address of the vulnerable OS v2 that I identified is 192.168.1.37:8080. So now it will check for any any web service running on the thing. You can say will only run the IP address, and okay. So you got the welcome to vulnerable OS v2, and vulnerable OS v2 are the services series of vulnerable objects packed with the vulnerable mission. Okay, they have given a description of it. So here is the website, company's website it is going for. So that means some web services is running there. So that means some web service is running on the computer. It is vulnerable OS. So how we can identify this? Is there any vulnerability present with that target web services? So what I do is I may use one tool called Nikto. Okay, so Nikto space http://192.168.1.37. So what is this Nikto tool? Actually, this Nikto tool is a vulnerability scanner. Is the only Nikto tool available only for vulnerability scanning? No. For vulnerability scanning, you will be having so many tools. So starting from Nikto, and Nmap also is used for the vulnerability scanning. However, there are so many vulnerability scanning tools available that was listed in the OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP. So you can go to the website owasp.org. There in that you will find this vulnerability scanning tools. So these are the tools especially for checking the vulnerability of the cross-site scripting, SQL injection, command injection, path traversal, and insecure server configuration, dynamic application security testing. So for all these things, these vulnerability security tools that are supported by this for vulnerability scanning were listed in this. Tool listing is like that in alphabetical order it was mentioned. So you look at so many tools are there. Not only one tool, many tools are there. But the only thing is at least you should know one or two tools, usage of one or two tools for at least one category. For example, you want to scan web applications, then you use one or two tools like Nikto tool or maybe a OpenVAS or maybe Nessus. So these are the various free and open tools that are available, and they have given the whether the tools are open or commercial. Here Vega is their open source tool, and WebCookies is there, it's a free tool. So like that, do you find anywhere Nikto? Okay, Nikto is also there. Nikto is an open source tool which you can run on the Linux or Unix operating system. So like that, you can find various. See here, Nessus. I told you, Nessus is a tool, and it's now it became commercial. Previously, it is open source, and here also you will be having two categories, both the community edition and enterprise edition. Enterprise edition is commercial, and community edition still you can use. Like that, you have various other tools available here, and Grubsuit is there, which is also one type of commercial, and here also community edition is there that you can use for free. So like that, various scanning tools are there, but all these network scanning, vulnerability scanning tools will not do all scanning types. One or each and every tool is specialized in their own scanning, like maybe a web application scanning or maybe an operating system scanning, maybe like that. So Nikto host http://192.168.1.37. So now it will go for of the host, especially for the 8080 port service. That means 8080 means it is the web service. Okay. So here the server used by the target is Apache server, which is of version 2.4.7, and this was launched on Ubuntu operating system. And it was identified that in that web service that is running, or web server that is running on the target computer, anti-click jogging and xframe options header is not present, and xcontent type option is not set, and no CGA directory is found. And it was identified that Apache server was found outdated, and allowed HTTP methods that you can use with the web page that you identified here are like this. That is this is the this is the web page of that. In this with this web page, you can use the HTTP methods such as get method, head method, post method, and options. Now you look at here, it identified one vulnerability, that is OSVDB 3233. This is the vulnerability identified by the Nikto tool. That means this is in the open common vulnerability database. You can copy this vulnerability name, that is 3233 number, and you can search in it, so that you will identify what is the consequence of exploiting this. What is the consequence of exploiting this vulnerability, and what is the details of this vulnerability. So you look at this is the advantage of vulnerability scanners. They will scan the target and they will give you the vulnerability number, because many of the vulnerability open source vulnerability scanners will take the help of the common vulnerability database. So finally, it was identified that OSVDB 3233 is the vulnerability number that was identified. So what you can do is you may go to this common vulnerability exposure database, or you may also go to the exploit DB database. Okay, exploit DB. So exploit DB is also a kind of exploitation database where you find the signatures of the attacks and all. It will also use the patterns like CVE itself. So here you can search for this. I am placing this CVE number, and you can search it in the exploit DB database. So the beautiful thing that you can do is once you know the CVE number, then you can go to the Google search and you can identify this. So by default, again, it will go into the CVE website itself. Right? The CVE 2007-3233. Learn more about the National Vulnerability Database Set. The description of this vulnerability is TECIT T-bar code OCX ActiveX control allows remote attackers to overwrite arbitrary files via save image method. That means any file, if you save it as an image, any arbitrary file can be saved as an image and can be stored in the web server. So this is what the vulnerability that is the vulnerability information. And if you know the vulnerability number, you can use the related payloads that are available in the open vulnerability scanning tools, such as vulnerability tools like Metasploit. You can use appropriate payloads, and you can exploit that particular payload on the target so that this requirement you can satisfy. That is, you can easily attack this particular, or you can perform this attack, like allowing the remote attacker. Remote attacker means the one who is not in the site. So the allowing of the remote attacker to overwrite arbitrary files via the save image method. So this is the way the common vulnerability database will help us in maintaining the vulnerability information and also knowing the impact of this vulnerability. And how to open this Metasploit and all. So you can say that MSF console. You can go to the MSF console, which is the Metasploit framework console. So there you can go for searching of the vulnerabilities. And also you can go to the Google search. There you can type the code, that is you can go to the code of this CVE 2017-3233 and you'll see the payload in Metasploit. So it will give you the related information: Metasploit, Apache, Python, and this is the information. We will use the gather of information of this, and you will get the related payload information. So that payload information you use along with the MSF console that you will open here, and you need to use the IP address of the target and related payloads and set the port number and try to go for exploit. So for Metasploit and all, discussion of the Metasploit is not the part of this course. Hence, I am not discussing this. But you can have discussion of this. You can learn this Metasploit and all via many open source documents that I will provide the links and all afterwards. But this is not the part of our course. I am going to give you only the bird eye view of how this Metasploit framework will help us in launching the attacks once you know the vulnerability which is present on the target. Well, this is the Metasploit console that you have explored. And here you look at 2081 exploits, 1124 auxiliary, 352 post exploit things, and 592 payloads, 445 encoders, 10 and no operations, 7 evasions techniques were loaded in this Metasploit. That this itself is sufficient for you to practice the identification of the what you call vulnerabilities and how to load the payload and all. So you can go to the metasploit.com, or you may find many beautiful documentations online, and you can go through that. So in this way, whenever any attacker is performing the attack, obviously it will be having a traffic pattern. The IDPSs that are placed on the organizational network will scan through that network traffic and will identify any vulnerabilities or any wrong pattern is coming into the organizational network or not. So this is what the IDPSs will do. So attackers will perform the attack, and for that related traffic will be generated, and IDPSs, by taking the CVE database into consideration, we all know that the signature-based IDPSs will be useful when to deal with the already known attacks. So already known attacks are already fed in the CVE database. Hence, they can easily detect the wrong pattern. So what is correct pattern, that is what is normal pattern, what is an abnormal pattern, and how to distinguish these patterns, and this discussion we'll see in the next lecture.